You think you're free,
but you're not. You wake up when you're told, work where you're told, spend what you're told, and you call it life, the truth. You were never meant to escape the cycle. You were trained to stay in if the bars aren't made of steel, they're made of debt, fear, and distraction. And the scariest part, most people will spend their entire lives defending the prison that's killing them. You were born into a world that promised you freedom. It's printed on your passports, engraved in national anthems, and sold to you in commercials with smiling faces driving convertibles down coastal highways. But the version you received is not the one you were promised. The freedom you know is a packaged product, marketable and hollow from the day you took your first breath. The rules of your life were already written. They told you that freedom meant choice, what to wear, what to eat, what to watch. But choice without power is an illusion. You can choose from 1,000 brands of shoes, but you cannot choose to live without paying rent. You can decide between 100 streaming services, but you cannot decide to stop paying taxes. The boundaries of your life were set long before you could walk, and within those invisible walls, you are told you are free. History has a way of repeating itself, but it never repeats in the same costume. Centuries ago, the peasant bowed to the feudal lord. The currency was grain, and the price of protection was loyalty and labor. Today, you bow to your employer, your landlord, your lender. The currency is digital, and the price of survival is the same. Loyalty and labor. What has changed is the packaging. The feudal chains were visible. The modern chains are wrapped in comfort, convenience, and distraction. Think about it. Most people will spend the majority of their waking lives exchanging time for money, not because they want to, but because they must. This is not a personal failure. It is the system working exactly as it was designed. The average person will work 40 to 60 hours a week for 50 years, and at the end of it, will still need a pension or government assistance just to survive. This is not freedom, it is a lifelong lease on your own existence. The genius of the modern system is that it makes you believe you chose this life. You are told to follow your dreams, but only if your dreams can pay the bills. You are encouraged to be yourself, but only in ways that can be monetized. Even rebellion is sold back to you as a product. Your anti-establishment t-shirt is owned by the same corporation that owns the brand you think you're protesting. This illusion of freedom works because it's not enforced with whips or chains. It's enforced with incentives and fears. You're rewarded for compliance with small luxuries, weekend trips, new gadgets, subscription boxes. You're punished for defiance with late fees, eviction notices, credit score damage instead of a prison cell. You are given a mortgage instead of a guard. You are given a boss. Ask yourself, if you were truly free, why does every step toward independence come with a price? Why does living without debt feel impossible? Why are you constantly running, not toward something, but away from the fear of losing everything? The system thrives on this quiet desperation. It doesn't need to chase you. It only needs to keep you chasing. The same psychological tactics have been used throughout history, only adapted to the technology of the era. In ancient times, rulers used religion to declare that your place in life was the will of the gods. In the industrial age, they used nationalism to convince you that your sacrifice was for the glory of the nation. Today, they use consumerism to make you believe that happiness is just one more purchase away. The story changes, the control remains. This is the uncomfortable truth. The majority of your struggles are not the result of your own inadequacies, but of a system engineered to keep you in a perpetual state of controlled insufficiency. You are allowed just enough to stay alive, and just desperate enough to stay obedient. The beauty of this design is that it turns your cage into a mirror. When you fail to escape, you blame yourself. If you think you are immune, look closer. Even those who rise to financial success often find themselves chained by different forces: fear of losing status, pressure to maintain an image, dependence on markets they cannot control. The system does not simply target the poor, it engulfs everyone, adjusting the type of chain to the size of the wallet. Freedom, in its purest form, means the ability to live on your own terms without coercion. It is not given, It is taken, and taking it requires first recognizing the architecture of the cage. You cannot break free from something you refuse to seethe. Modern skyline is a monument to this illusion. Towers of glass and steel rise above the streets, each window reflecting a life spent working inside to afford the life outside. Millions rush through subway stations and crowded sidewalks, all believing they are chasing their own ambitions, when in reality, they are running the same track, in the same wheel, toward the same endpoint. They call this progress, they call this freedom, but ask yourself, freedom must be bought, if survival must be rented, if the price of peace is perpetual labor, was it ever freedom at all? And, if not, then whose freedom are we really living? The most effective chains are the ones you never see. The modern world has mastered the art of building them not from iron, but from numbers on a screen, contracts you can't refuse, and promises that seem too reasonable to question. Dependency is not an accident of the system. It is the foundation of it. The economy doesn't thrive when you are free, it thrives when you are tethered, and so, from the moment you take your first step into adulthood, the system begins weaving an invisible web designed to keep you close, compliant, and always coming back. Consider the way you earn your living for centuries. Wages have been calibrated not to enrich the worker, but to keep them needing more in the industrial age. Factory owners learned that paying just enough to survive, never enough to truly prosper, kept workers tied to their machines. The formula hasn't changed. Whether it's a factory floor or a tech company office, most salaries are strategically matched to the cost of living, ensuring that even those who make it can't afford to walk away. The brilliance of this system is that it doesn't need to threaten you to keep you in place. It simply ensures that the moment you stop working, the ground beneath you disappears without a paycheck. Rent is due without rent. The roof over your head vanishes without that roof. The rest of your life collapses. The system doesn't need to force your hand, it lets the fear of falling do the work. Debt is the perfect leash. Unlike physical chains, it doesn't stop you from moving. It just makes sure you never stop moving in the direction they want. The invention of consumer credit transformed dependency from a temporary necessity into a permanent condition. Once upon a time, debt was shameful. Now, it's a rite of passage. Student loans, car payments, credit cards, these aren't signs of failure. They're milestones. You graduate with debt, you marry with debt, you retire with debt. The system has made debt so normal that living without it feels unnatural. Inflation is another silent weapon. The cost of living rises, wages stagnate, and you are left chasing a moving target every year. The value of your labor buys you less, and yet you're told to work harder, save more, invest smarter. You're made to believe that if you can't keep up, it's because you lack discipline, not because the rules of the game are rigged against you. History shows us that dependency has always been a tool of control. In feudal Europe, peasants were free in name but tied to the land, paying rent to lords in the form of crops and labor. In colonial economies, workers were paid in company-issued currency that could only be spent at the company's store, a closed loop designed to keep wealth from ever leaving the hands of the owner. Today, the loop is bigger, but it's the same. Your paycheck leaves your hands and goes to banks, landlords, corporations, and governments before you can decide what to do with it. We are taught to admire those who have made it, but even success is often just a higher tier of dependence. The corporate executive with a 7-figure salary is chained to quarterly reports, stockholder demands, and market swings he cannot control. The small business owner depends on credit lines, supply chains, and a customer base trained to expect constant growth. The wealthy are not exempt from dependence. They simply depend on larger, more complex systems. Dependency is reinforced through culture, media, and advertising, condition us to see reliance as safety. You're told that renting is better than owning because maintenance is covered. You're told that a steady job is better than uncertain freedom because benefits are included. The very word independent has been rebranded to mean reckless, unstable, or irresponsible. The subtext is clear. You can't survive without Usavon. The safety nets are built to keep you tethered. Welfare programs, unemployment benefits, and public assistance are often structured in ways that discourage true independence. Earn too much, and you lose them. Earn too little, and you can't escape them. The system doesn't want you to fall, but it doesn't want you to climb out. Either it wants you balanced perfectly between survival and desperation. This is the genius of manufactured dependency. It doesn't just limit your options. It shapes your desires when you are trained to believe that stability comes from an employer, that comfort comes from consumer goods, that safety comes from credit. You stop seeking freedom, you start seeking better terms for your captivity, a higher salary, a lower interest rate, a nicer apartment. These become the victories you chase. All within the same cage, and here lies the uncomfortable truth. The system doesn't need to hide what it's doing. The rules are printed in plain sight in loan agreements, tax codes, and employment contracts. But the language is so dense, the culture so loud, that you never stop to read the fine print. And if you do, you tell yourself it's the price of living in a modern world. The architects of this design understand something simple. People will accept almost any limitation as long as they feel they have chosen it. You think you chose your mortgage, your job, your car payment, but what you really chose was between one chain and another breaking. Free from this dependency begins with recognizing its architecture: the rent that keeps you working, the debt that keeps you compliant, the inflation that keeps you running, the culture that keeps you grateful for the privilege of your own servitude. Once you see it, you can no longer unsee it. But awareness is dangerous, not to you, but to the system, because the moment you realize the leash is there, you start pulling, and the more you pull, the weaker its hold becomes. This is why they keep you busy, distracted, exhausted, not so you can't see the chains, but so you never have the energy to break them. And if dependence is the cage, then the next step is to understand how we were trained to build it ourselves. That training begins earlier than you think, long before you signed your first loan agreement, before you clocked into your first job, before you even understood the concept of money. The system began shaping you. It started in a brightly colored classroom, with a bell that told you when to speak, when to move, and when to stop thinking for yourself. We are taught to believe that education is the path to freedom, that if we work hard, get good grades, and earn a degree, the world will open its gates. But for most, those gates lead not to liberation, but to another kind of captivity, one that is so normalized, we call it successor. Modern school system is not designed to produce independent thinkers. It is designed to produce compliant workers. Its origins can be traced to the Prussian education model of the 18th century, a system built not to nurture creativity, but to instill obedience. The Prussian government needed citizens who would follow orders without question, whether on the battlefield or in the factory, and so they built schools to teach punctuality, hierarchy, repetition, and conformative values that translate seamlessly into the corporate world. Look at the structure of a typical school day. You sit in rows, facing an authority figure. You raise your hand for permission to speak. You move from subject to subject at the sound of a bell. You memorize information, repeat it on command, and then forget it once it's no longer needed. This is not education. It's conditioning for a life where you will wake to an alarm, answer to a boss, and follow rules you didn't write. Creativity, curiosity, and independent thought are treated as distractions, not strengths. A child who questions too much is labeled disruptive. A student who thinks differently is told they're wrong, not because their idea lacks merit, but because it doesn't fit the answer key. By the time you graduate, you have been trained to value approval over originality, compliance over courage. Then comes the next trap: student debt, in a cruel twist. The very system that claims to be your ticket to freedom demands payment before you can even begin your journey. Student loans are sold as an investment in your future, but they function as shackles that bind you for decades. You enter the workforce already owing money, and because your degree was marketed as essential, you believe the debt is normal, inevitable. Even this debt does more than drain your bank account. It limits your choices. You may want to travel, start a business, or take risks in pursuit of your passions. But with monthly payments looming over you, You choose stability over exploration, and stability, in the language of the system, means servitude. Ivan, for those who avoid debt. The education trap still works. You graduate into a society where employers value credentials over skills, where the piece of paper matters more than the person holding it. This creates a hierarchy that keeps you climbing for validation. Another degree, another certification, another reason to believe you're not ready yet. Meanwhile, the system profits from your perpetual state of preparation. It's important to understand that this is not an accident. The alignment between the education system and the economic system is deliberate. Schools prepare you to fill roles in industries that thrive on your obedience. They teach you to follow established paths, not to create your own. And because the process is wrapped in the language of opportunity, most people never see the bars of the cage they are building. The cultural narrative reinforces the trap. Movies, TV shows, and social media glorify the struggle of student life and the eventual reward of a steady job, as if this is the natural order of things. Questioning it makes you sound ungrateful or unrealistic, and so, generation after generation walks the same path.